The history of Israel and Palestine is a complex and contentious one, rooted in both biblical and political contexts. The land has been the site of numerous conflicts and power struggles over the centuries, and the current Israeli-Palestinian conflict remains one of the most intractable and divisive issues in the world today. To understand the current situation, it is important to examine the historical relationship between Israel and the Middle Eastern nations and the events that have shaped their shared history. The region known as the Holy Land has played a central role in the spiritual and historical narratives of Judaism, Christianity, Islam, and the Orthodox Church, and has been the site of numerous wars, conquests, and migrations over the course of its long and storied history. In this video, we will have a glimpse of the key events that have shaped the relationship between Israel, Palestine, and the Middle East, from ancient biblical times to the present day. In order to understand deeper, we need to go back in time to the time of Abraham. Abraham is considered a patriarch and a significant figure in the religious traditions of Judaism, Christianity, and Islam. He is referred to as the father of many nations, including the Israelites and the Ishmaelites, who are associated with the Arab people. In the biblical narrative, Abraham's story is primarily found in the book of Genesis. He is initially known as Abram, and God makes a covenant with him, promising that he will be the father of a great nation. This covenant includes the promise of descendants, a land, Canaan, and blessings. The lineage of Abraham includes two prominent figures, Isaac and Ishmael, through whom different nations have descended. At the age of 100, through his wife Sarah, Abraham has a son named Isaac. The Israelites trace their lineage through Isaac, whose son Jacob is considered the patriarch of the 12 tribes of Israel. But before the birth of Isaac, Abraham had a son named Ishmael through Sarah's maidservant Hagar. Ishmael is considered the ancestor of the Ishmaelites and, in a broader sense, is associated with the Arab people. The narratives of Abraham, Isaac, and Ishmael form an integral part of the religious stories of Judaism, Christianity, and Islam. The descendants of Abraham are often seen as part of the fulfillment of God's promises, and the land of Canaan, promised to Abraham, is considered the promised land for the Israelites. The geopolitical map of Israel and Palestine. The modern geopolitical entities of Israel and Palestine have complex historical and political dimensions. The term Israelites is often used to refer to the ancient people of Israel, while Palestine refers to a region that includes modern Israel and the Palestinian territories. The contemporary conflicts in the region involve issues of land, identity, and political sovereignty, and they extend beyond the religious narratives associated with Abraham. Both Israelis and Palestinians claim the land as their rightful homeland, leading to ongoing tensions and violence. The Promised Land. The Promised Land is a term used in the Hebrew Bible to refer to the land promised by God to the descendants of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. This land is described as stretching from the river Nile to the Euphrates. The Promised Land is also known as Canaan. The Israelites, who were led by Abraham's grandson Jacob, whose name later changed to Israel, migrated to Egypt during a time of famine and were later enslaved by the Egyptians. After 430 years, God sent Moses to lead the Israelites out of Egypt and back to the Promised Land. And after wandering in the desert for another 40 years, the Israelites finally entered the Promised Land under the leadership of Joshua. The Israelites eventually conquered the land and established the kingdoms of Israel and Judah. The concept of the Promised Land continues to have significance in modern times, particularly in relation to the Israeli-Palestinian conflict. The kingdoms of Israel and Judah. The Israelites established a series of judges to govern them, but eventually they demanded a king. Saul was the first king, followed by David and then Solomon. During the reign of David and Solomon, the Israelite kingdom reached its height of power and prosperity. The temple in Jerusalem was built during this time. After the death of Solomon, the kingdom split into two, Israel in the north and Judah in the south. Later, the northern kingdom of Israel was conquered by the Assyrians in 722 BCE, and the southern kingdom of Judah was conquered by the Babylonians in 586 BCE. The Babylonian exile. It was in 586 BCE when the Babylonians conquered Judah and destroyed the first temple in Jerusalem. Many Jews were taken away to Babylon, where they lived in exile for 70 years. The Babylonian exile marked a turning point in Jewish history, as the Jews were dispersed throughout the ancient world again, and considering that they had just returned from slavery in Egypt. Return from exile. In 538 BCE, the Persian Emperor Cyrus the Great allowed the Jews to return to Judah and rebuild the temple. The returnees faced many challenges, including opposition from neighboring peoples and internal conflicts over religious and political leadership. The Roman occupation. After the Babylonian exile, the Jews were conquered and ruled by a series of empires, including the Persians, the Greeks, and the Hasmoneans, among others. In 63 BCE, the Roman Empire conquered the region and established a new province called Judea, the region that includes modern-day Israel and Palestine, ending the Hasmonean kingdom. Under Roman rule, the region was divided into 3 administrative districts: Judea, Samaria, and Galilee. The Romans appointed local rulers, including Herod the Great, who was notorious for his cruelty, but also known for his ambitious building projects, such as the Second Temple in Jerusalem. The Romans also appointed Pontius Pilate, who was in power during the time of Jesus. The birth of Christianity. During the Roman occupation of Palestine, the Jewish people were subjected to harsh rule and oppression. In this tumultuous time, a man named Jesus of Nazareth emerged as a religious leader, preaching a message of love and compassion. Jesus was born and raised in Judea during the Roman occupation. His teachings and miracles, as well as his claim to be the Messiah, attracted a large following and eventually led to his arrest, trial, and execution by the Romans. However, his followers continued to spread his message and eventually established the Christian religion. The early Christian community faced persecution from both the Romans and the Jewish authorities, but it continued to grow and flourish. Eventually, Christianity became the dominant religion of the Roman Empire, and its influence spread throughout the world. The Muslim Conquest. In 638 CE, Arab Muslim forces, or the Islamic Caliphate under the leadership of Caliph Umar, conquered Jerusalem and the surrounding region. Jerusalem became a holy city for Muslims, and the Dome of the Rock and Al-Aqsa Mosque were built on the Temple Mount, where the Jewish temple once stood. The Muslim rulers allowed Jews and Christians to practice their religions, but imposed a special tax on non-Muslims. This period of Muslim rule lasted until the arrival of the Crusaders in the 11th century. The Christian Crusaders. In the 11th century, Christian Europe launched a series of military campaigns known as the Crusades. The Crusades were a series of military campaigns launched by Christian Europe against Muslim rule in the Holy Land. The First Crusade was launched in 1096 and resulted in the capture of Jerusalem in 1099. The Crusaders established Christian kingdoms in the region, but it was later recaptured by Muslim forces under Saladin in 1187. The Crusades had a lasting impact on the region and contributed to the ongoing conflict between Israelis and Palestinians. The region was then conquered and reconquered by several other tribes and nations, up until the time of the Ottoman Empire. The Ottoman Empire, colloquially known as the Turkish Empire, controlled the region that is now Israel and Palestine from the early 16th century until the end of World War I in the late 19th century. During this time, the region experienced relative stability and economic growth. However, the empire was in decline and losing control of its territories as it suffered from occasional conflicts and uprisings. The League of Nations and the British Mandate. In 1917, during World War I, the British captured and took Jerusalem and the surrounding area from the Ottoman Empire. After the war, The League of Nations, which was the first worldwide intergovernmental organization whose principal mission was to maintain world peace, granted Britain a mandate to administer the territory, which became known as Palestine. It was founded on the 10th of January 1920 by the Paris Peace Conference that ended the First World War in 1918. The British mandate included a commitment to establish a Jewish national home in Palestine, while also protecting the rights of the Arab population. Jewish immigration to Palestine increased during this period, leading to tensions between Jews and Arabs, Zionism, and the Balfour Declaration. In the late 19th and early 20th centuries, a movement called Zionism emerged among European Jews who sought to establish a Jewish homeland in Palestine. This movement gained momentum after the Balfour Declaration of 1917, in which the British government supported establishing a Jewish national home in Palestine. The European surviving Jews of the Holocaust sought to establish their home back in Israel, the land of their forefathers, Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, whose name changed to Israel, because in the book of Genesis chapter 32, he had wrestled with God and would not let go until the Lord blessed him, and that he had also struggled with people until he overcame. In 1929, violent clashes broke out between the two groups, resulting in the deaths of hundreds of people. The British mandate in Palestine lasted until Israel declared independence in 1948. So, on the 14th of May 1948, the State of Israel was founded. David Ben-Gurion was the primary national founder of the State of Israel, as well as the state's first prime minister, born in Plonsk, Poland. And a day after the declaration, it became embroiled in a war with its Arab neighbors, Jordan, Egypt, Syria, and Iraq. Arab-Jewish tensions and violence. As Jewish immigration to Palestine increased, tensions between Arabs and Jews also grew. In the 1920s and 1930s, there were numerous outbreaks of violence, including riots and attacks on both sides. The British, who controlled Palestine at the time, struggled to maintain order and prevent further violence. The US Embassy moved to Jerusalem. In May 2018, the United States officially moved its embassy from Tel Aviv to Jerusalem, recognizing Jerusalem as the capital of Israel. This move was met with widespread protests and condemnation from Palestinians, who also claimed Jerusalem as their capital. The Gaza Protests. Since March 2018, Palestinians in Gaza have been holding weekly protests along the border with Israel, demanding the right to return to their ancestral homes. These protests have often turned violent, with Israeli forces using lethal force against protesters. The protests have resulted in hundreds of deaths and thousands of injuries. Normalization. Agreements with Arab countries. In September 2020, the United Arab Emirates and Bahrain signed agreements to normalize relations with Israel. These agreements were seen as a major diplomatic breakthrough, but were also criticized by some who argued that they undermined the Palestinian cause. Will there ever be peace? The Israeli-Palestinian conflict has been ongoing for decades, with both sides experiencing violence, loss of life, and displacement. This complex history and ongoing conflict between Israel and Palestine requires continued efforts towards peace, understanding, and mutual respect. The international community continues to call for a peaceful resolution to the conflict, but achieving this goal remains elusive. And now, what does the Bible say about Israel? After going over the historical bit about Israel, there is also a special revelation I would like to share with you in the next video as to what the Bible says about Israel. Please subscribe, as it is important to understand the spiritual nature of Israel and how it is linked to some important biblical prophecies, why Jesus wept over Jerusalem and what is to come. Thanks for watching, and see you in the next video.